Okay, well, it looks like the recording is actually working. So, welcome, sister, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your Good Friday to join me for a discussion.
Thank you for having me, Regis. I'm happy to be here.
Great, great. So the way we've kind of started this off in the past couple of, we've done two so far, so I'm still learning as well. Um, is just a little bit of a discussion about what quarantine life has
Mm.
been like for you, because I haven't seen you in probably a month at this point. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel like well, maybe it does feel like it's been that long. But what has it been like for you? Since everything kind of closed down and we've been stuck inside.
I think the word that comes to mind first is surreal. It's just such a strange feeling, a strange time for all of us, and it's on the practical level, it's almost like a summer vacation. But on
Hmm.
a day-to-day level, it's definitely not because we're still trying to live as much of a normal schedule, normal routine as possible, um, and it's heavier. It's heavier.
Hmm.
Like everything takes a little bit longer. Everything takes some more figuring out, and it's just a step more difficult. And I think the interruption for our prayer life and for going to mass and having that relationship with other people in the church community, it's draining. It's draining. But at
Hmm.
the same time, there's a special grace that comes with it. I think every time we're tested, God comes back with more grace to get us through.
Absolutely. Well said. And I really like that you mentioned that there's something to be said for worshiping in a community, and having that interaction with other people, because it's not really something that we think about until we don't have it. Um, but especially just I watched a live streamed Holy Thursday Mass last night, and it was just so striking, um, to have this, one of the holiest nights of the year, and it's like echoey in the church because there's not people sitting in the pews, and it's just a very, um, I think surreal is the best word that you could use to describe it, because we are like social beings and we're made to be with each other. And even our very church and faith is a universal church. It's not a sit at home by yourself church.
Amen. And God came in person in the man of Jesus Christ, and he didn't come in a Zoom. So
Right.
it's
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
body reality. It's very important to us. So
Yes. So I wanted to ask you, because your situation, of course, with quarantine isn't just that. I think we have in common that it's not just, oh, I don't get to go into work. It's that I don't get to see the young people that I work with. Because I know you teach in the school. I obviously run the youth group, and thank God we actually just had our first youth group meeting on Wednesday via Zoom, and it went okay.
that's
nothing
good.
nothing crashed. No, there was no Zoom bombing, anything like that. So I was very happy. But what has that been like for you? Have you felt that absence a little bit of the young people that you work with?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's so difficult to reach someone through video. And um, as I heard in a homily the other day, just that is actually about Sir Ian McKellen doing The Hobbit, and that when they was
Ah,
doing it, The
I
Hobbit was
like
sort
it.
of from Lord of the Rings. Okay, yeah, so here's where it goes. Um, in The Hobbit, they used a lot of CGI, and on
Hmm.
one set, it was Ian McKellen and all these actors who were just wearing CGI suits, and he had to leave the scene because he said, "I didn't get into acting to work with computers. I didn't come into it to interact with these digital beings."
Mm,
And so it feels very much the same way in relating to young people and relating to anyone, whether it's in the parish or in the school. This is obviously not why we got into what we're into or why we got missioned into where we're missioned.
right.
And we have to stretch that extra bit. So the great thing is some students, um, they respond differently to the digital interface. And for some people, it helps them to open up.
Hmm.
So as much as this is a difficulty for many of us, for some people, it's a new avenue of relationship and maybe
Sure.
something to continue in future at a certain level. So
Hmm.
there's the blessing side of what this can be for us.
Definitely. Definitely. And it's important to recognize that as much as we recognize the difficulties. Because if we're just all in our heads, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world, like, we're gonna eat ourselves from the inside out.
Exactly.
um, so I want to touch on. So today is, I'm not sure exactly when this video is going to go out, but today, when we're actually filming it, it's Good Friday,
Mhm.
and it's Good Friday at about 10 o'clock in the morning. So obviously, we're a couple of hours away from the time that we recognize as the time that Jesus actually was physically crucified and on the cross. It's a very somber spiritual time, and we're right in the thick of the Paschal Triduum, which is the holiest time of the year, for us as Catholics. And there's, these past couple of weeks of, quarantine and not being in mass and not being able to be together has certainly been difficult. But I think it takes on a different sheen during this specific time, because it's so holy and it's supposed to be different from, our Sunday mass and our weekly prayer routine and that sort of thing. So maybe, can you talk to me a little bit about how you're planning on still marking these holy days in your life, when it's very it's very difficult for days to feel different right now. um, but these days are to feel different. So tell me a little bit about how you're, personally in your community, how you're marking that time.
Sure. And I think we're especially blessed to live Holy Week in a particular way. Our community starts actually the day before Palm Sunday. We have this whole sequence that lasts, I think it's the 8 days from
Oh, wow.
Saturday before Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday.
Hmm.
And actually, Father Mike Schmitz gave a short little spiel on it. So if you YouTube Father Mike Schmitz and Holy, he'll explain our thing really fast. But basically, we live with the gospel message of each day in a particular way. For instance, on Monday, we hear about Mary washing Jesus' feet with the perfume,
Hmm.
and it's extravagant. It was 300 days' wages, and there's the perfume. So we call Monday Extravagant Monday. And on
Hmm.
that day, we dress up our tables really nicely. We have a very fancy dinner. We kind of try to bust out everything that we can to celebrate that day. And it's a way that we can live it um, outside of the specific liturgy, but bring
Yeah.
that into a daily life. So bringing the liturgy into what we do every day.
Hmm.
I think that's been the biggest challenge of this whole quarantine time is we have to live the liturgy because we don't get it in a particular way at
Right.
mass itself, even if we're able to be present in a digital way. So that's the gift of what our community has been doing. And it's hard. We're so, as a Franciscan, we're so centered in the physical reality. So not having that Easter fire, not having the blessing of the water, not having
Mm.
the different processions, that's really difficult for us in a particular way.
Absolutely.
So we're getting creative in what we can do and yeah, and what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I can totally relate with that particular, difficulty of not being able to be in the physical world with the mass. Franciscan spirituality is one of my favorite spiritualities. I come from a Franciscan background. My home parish is Capuchin, and I worked with the Capuchins in New York for a year. So I love me some St. Francis, and I really relate to the, um, being Christ in the world and bringing Christ into the world. And it's very tough to do that right now in the traditional sense that we're used to. Um, so it's good to hear that you're looking for different ways, and it's like a proof from geometry, from forever ago. But it's like, all right, here you have to get to this place, and you have to figure out some funky fancy way to get there.
That's right. That's right.
But I want to talk a little bit about, so you mentioned things that you're doing together with your community. And this is kind of the meat of what I want to talk about this morning, is not just community, but intentional community. Because this is something that both you and I obviously have experienced. You live it daily. I have not had a, uh, lifelong experience of intentional community, or at least I haven't framed it that way. But when I did my year of service in New York last year, I lived with 5 other volunteers in an intentional community. So can you talk a little bit about what it means to be in intentional community, and also what your experience with it has been? Just describe your vocation in, a couple of minutes.
Oh, easy. That's fine. Yeah.
Easy. Yeah.
I guess the first step, like the primary factor, is all of us being centered in the same mystery and reality. And so all of us, as Franciscan Sisters of the Eucharist too, having that centering in the Eucharist, again, in an extended way, as we're faced with different challenges. But it's the rhythm. I think for me personally too, it's the orarium and the rhythm of our daily life that keeps us all in sync and helps us all to live with each other in a way that is keeping us together and lifted towards Christ. So it's important to structure it around both the prayer time as well as meal time and work time and recreation time. And we're not super rigid about that. We don't have like certain hours where you must do this or must do that.
Mm-hmm.
But we live gently with each other through, here's our set time for prayer. What is the need in the next moment? How do we do it together? And especially the silence of Good Friday in particular, that it doesn't have to be a long conversation. Being present to each other doesn't have to be words, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be eye contact in some ways. If we're able to do little things for each other, or to show that we have a community-centered conscientiousness in how we go about our way of doing things, that's a lot of where it comes from. So not just the vocal level, although that's very important. It's how do we be present in the silence, or be present when we're separated. So,
Wow,
and
that's timely.
yes, exactly. And there's part of the dynamic of Holy Saturday, which we'll get to tomorrow, that we think of is presence in absence. Because sometimes when there's an absence, that's when we feel the presence the most. When someone is no longer there, or when this thing is no longer being done, we suddenly have a very much greater appreciation for who that person is, or what that activity symbolized or sacramentalized for us. So that's part of the intentional community that we're building, is how are we there for each other even when we're not present to each other. And we have some students who are in very strict quarantine right now because they work in healthcare. And so going by their empty spaces, it's empty chairs at empty tables from Les Mis.
Ooh, little Les Mis, okay.
Yeah. But that's how it feels. And when you see the empty chair, you feel the weight of the cross. You feel the weight of the cross that the community is carrying, and that sister in particular is carrying. And when we're present to each other in that, we know that she's still held within our community in the mystery of corporate togetherness. And at the same time, wherever she's going in the hospital, we're with her too, because we're sharing that. We're sharing that going out dynamic.
Absolutely, yeah. That is, there's a lot that you just said that I think is really kind of hit the nail on the head. There's the thing that I pulled the most out of it, and that I can really relate to in my, albeit brief, experience of intentional community, is that it is less about the corporal actions and what you do, and it has a lot to do with the underlying shared base of understanding and values that you have. Now, obviously, you and your community members share, you're members of the same religious order, so you have this, not only just a shared base of understanding, but it's an intense, lifelong set of vows and, this dedication to the Eucharist and Franciscan spirituality that binds you together. My experience is definitely a little different. Still Franciscan though.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, last year, or I don't know. It was August of 2018 through July of 2019. I
Okay.
gave a year of service at Capuchin Youth and Family Ministries in Garrison, New York, running Catholic retreats for young people. And it was awesome. Probably the best year of my life. Had an absolute blast. Really grew in my own faith. Just a tremendous experience. But one of the best parts and the most challenging parts was living in intentional community. So there were 6 of us volunteers, and we all lived together about 20 minutes from where we worked. And there were definitely periods of adjustment, because that was my first experience with intentional community, or at least framing it as intentional community in my mind. So of course we had the shared base of, we all wanted to do a year of service. We all wanted to do a year of service here at CYFM, and we all had at least some level of devotion to Franciscan spirituality. But with that came other things. As a part of our contract, quote unquote, we were to eat meals together at least 4 times a week. We were to pray together as often as possible. We were to work intentionally to build relationships with all other members of the community equally, which, not devoting more attention to one person or another. And that that's difficult for a bunch of recent college graduates to kind of all grasp together. Definitely. So there's a very steep learning curve for that. But, now after the year, of course, I mean, all 5 of them I consider my very dear friends, and we're constantly in communication, especially during this period. And much like you said, with your sisters who, are going out into the healthcare field and kind of on the front lines of this battle, we're each carrying each other through our various different jobs, lives, ministries, challenges, and everything that we're experiencing. So there is a lot of comfort that brings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what both of our experiences have been. But I want to get into the nitty gritty a little bit.
Okay.
So what have been the challenges, like the toughest parts of living in intentional community, and the benefits that you have gleaned from either working through those challenges or, just being in community in general? Because this relates to everyone, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Sure. The challenge is pretty easy to identify, and it's the barriers that you place within yourself. That is probably the biggest challenge to living a corporate life, to living an intentional community, is you reach the hard spaces in your heart, and you have to break them down. And you have to let other people help you break them down. And that can be a very vulnerable experience. It's usually uncomfortable, but what it can open up within you after that is incredible, and is really the goal of community, because we can't just keep building walls around us. In a very practical way, walls are good because it shelters us from the storms. Walls keep out the bad things. Walls do all those sensible things that we do want some structure to our internal self, but we never want that to be a barrier between what we want to be able to give and what others need to be able to give to us. So that's, I guess that's a sort of trite way of answering that part of it, the biggest challenge, because obviously it looks different. And for instance, growing up, one of the most, what should I say, risky? One of the riskiest things you could do in our house growing up was loading the dishwasher. Everyone has a different way of how to load the dishwasher.
Oh my gosh, that is so true.
Right? So who's looking over your shoulder? You're like, oh, I'll load the dishwasher, or no, I will not touch it because Dad will not be happy, or does not want it this way. So, I mean, growing up a family is an intentional community, and I think I can see that now from my later perspective, but as a teenager, I didn't see it that way. And I
No.
certainly wasn't trying to live in intentional community as a teen. But the family is our basis for that. So in the same way that those little practicals were risky in the family, there are just some day-to-day things living in community that this isn't in our Constitution. It's not like the Vatican needs to decree how we fold our socks or whatever it is that might need to. But to not let those kinds of things get in the way of what really needs to happen. Because at the end of the day, it's not about loading the dishwasher. It's about caring for the body of Christ.
Mm.
And right now, the body of Christ is the sister next to me. And I can't let my preconceived ideas or my limitations or no, I really do know the best way to load the dishwasher and it's my way. I can't, it's not about the dishwasher.
Right.
So that being the challenge, and also the greatest gain, because when you're able to have an open heart, and when the person next to you has been opening her heart, then you're able to reach each other on a much deeper level, on a spiritual understanding that
Mm.
is beyond the practicals. It's beyond, oh, we have a similar mission and charism, but it becomes, I don't know, maybe in an Eve kind of a bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Not obviously in the same intensity,
Sure.
but being able to see, here's another soul like my own trying to make it to Christ.
Mm. It's a much deeper level of relating to someone than
Yes.
we're used to.
Yeah.
And that can definitely be, that's, I think, where a lot of that fear of breaking down those walls comes from,
Yes.
because many of us have never experienced having that particular type of connection with someone where you can bare your soul to them, um, literally bare your soul, as in, like, I am really struggling with this sin and I am worried that it's damaging my relationship with God. I mean, that ain't easy to talk about.
Yes.
Um, I do love that you mentioned the dishwasher, because we had the exact, like, that was a point of contention in my community last year, was how I loaded the dishwasher. So I felt that. I
It's real.
felt that.
It's real.
It's absolutely real, but it can come from anything, any number of little menial household duties
Mm.
and things like that. Um, and that is what we're all going through right now. You're absolutely right when you say that the family is an intentional community. And a couple of times I said last year was the first time I had framed being an
Yeah.
intentional community. But
Yeah.
by being in a family, we are all in intentional community and have been to a degree for our whole lives. It's just a lot more evident right now than it has ever been in the past. We've all been kind of forced into constant community and constant intentional community, and that is not comfortable. Um, and I mean, I am sure that it hasn't been easy for you and your sisters, as it hasn't been easy for my family. And I would assume just about every family out there has had some form of difficulty with, all of a sudden, everyone's home all the time.
Yes. And we all need the internet. And yeah.
Oh gosh, don't even get me started on the internet.
We'll all talk about it.
I've been My situation is a little different because I work at St. Bridget about 3 days of the week, preparing for youth group and, discovering other opportunities for our young people. The other 2 days of the week, I work from home at a different job doing voice work. That's why I have this microphone. Um, and I really enjoy my 2 days working from home when no one is around. But now everyone is home and I'm working from home every day, which is a huge shift. So we're all in this community right now, being cooped up together. Um, how do we recognize and live out the intentionality of these communities? Because I doubt many of us think of our families as an intentional community every day. that's just not the way that our society wires us to view our family. So how do we take being cooped up together and how do we make that intentional? That's the discussion I want to have with you, is
Mhm.
how do we bring intentionality into this difficult situation?
It's an excellent question, and so much of it is, like you're saying, it's an awareness. It's a really tying into the intentional part of it, um, and some of that does come through simple acts of kindness. And for instance, in our house, we have cooking schedules, and everyone cooks a meal at some point during the week, and that's one way that we
Hmm,
give of ourselves. That shows that we're thinking of others. We're tying into every other person's needs and trying to provide in a very practical way. And mealtime, I don't know, that's sort of like the family orarium, right? So
hmm,
in religious household, we do certain hours of prayer, and mealtime is a pre-Eucharistic reality. This is sharing bread. This is being together on a
right.
relational level that Christ chose for his disciples, for the apostles.
Hmm,
So so making those times a priority, especially if, well, we're all working at home, there's no reason we can't all stop at one time and at least take half an hour to be together and to relate.
hmm,
um, I think that's pretty key, and meals is an easy way to make that time happen because you have to eat eventually. So
mm-hmm,
yeah. um, a family prayer too is important, and I have to say, I know, like my family, the only prayer we said together was grace.
mm-hmm,
And so we weren't the kind of family who would say the rosary together. But if somebody had asked or started it or said, I'm going to pray a rosary at 3 o'clock if anyone wants to come, my siblings and I would have been there. So
mm-hmm,
it's that same idea. If you're not the kind of household that tends to be open about prayer, or you don't usually share prayer, now's the time to make it happen. Uh,
mm,
so take a risk
mm.
and see what happens.
Yeah,
And if you're the only one praying the rosary, guess what? You're still praying the rosary, and that's fine. So
that's right.
keep reaching out. Um, and it's, again, it's reaching people in a creative way and being aware of each other.
Mm,
And maybe one day each person has an opportunity to choose something that we do together. Maybe it's, oh, I want to play a board game, so we do that. And that's your way of being together that evening. Yes, what would you play?
that's me.
What would you be playing?
Oh, well, we've actually been doing we've been trying some virtual board games with our neighbors and friends. So we'll hop on a Zoom call and tilt the camera down to a board game. Our number one has been Scattergories. We've been playing a lot of Scattergories.
That's a good one. That's a
It's
good one.
great.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I'd play anything, but that's been our go-to.
and a pretty easy one for virtual too, because you're not moving pieces around. So that's
Right. Yeah, the lists are all online. All you really need is a piece of paper and a pen and one person to have a copy of the game, and boom, you're good.
yeah. Right. Well, see, that's a perfect example. So making an intentional community, for games, for movies, for, oh my gosh, like, there'd be at least one person in the family saying, okay, my evening activity is going to be cleaning the house. And then, so
Mm,
you'd be doing it together. So it's still intentional community. Um,
yes.
yeah. Yeah. Actually, when I was growing up, so we had a chore time, and we would set our phones to a certain alarm clock. This is in the summertime, I guess, because all the kids would be home.
Hmm.
And we used that song from Enchanted, the one with Amy Adams, and she sings this
Ooh.
happy little working song. Well, I
Okay.
because that was the alarm on the phone. So the song would go off, it's time to
Uh,
clean. So for 15 minutes, we would all just clean something.
mm-hmm.
And it became a really interesting way of intentional community, because otherwise everybody hates cleaning. But suddenly when someone else is doing it and someone else is doing it, we share the energy, and it
Mm,
becomes something that lifts us up, and not just something that, oh, we have to do because it's time.
right.
This is a way of being together and sharing
Mm,
a mission.
yeah, and it goes right back to what you said before, which is it's not about what you're doing. It's not about playing a game or watching a movie or cleaning something, or it's not about that. It's the important part is that whatever you're doing is reflecting that underlying assumption and belief that this community is a community for a reason, and we're working together to bring each other closer to Christ. And also on a more basic level, we're working together to help each other not go nuts during
Yes.
being stuck inside the house for like a month plus. So I think it's so important to just really drill that into our brains, is that it's not about what exactly we're doing at every moment, because we have unlimited moments right now to do unlimited things. So it's much more about the underlying assumption than the actual physical what we do. Um, but I definitely agree that with a couple of things that you said about how to make this community that we're so used to feel more intentional. Those little acts of kindness and charity for each other, they make a really big difference. You've heard this all the time, I'm sure, as have our young people. I would hope that one small thing can brighten someone's day. You know, if it's like my mom will sometimes just like leave a chocolate on our bed, you know, every now and again. It's nice, you know, with a little note, or something like that. Or, you know, sometimes just my sister will make a snack for someone. She's handy in the kitchen, so she'll just whip something up and say, "Hey, you want a snack?" And yes, of course I
I
want
do.
a snack. um, with regards to meal times, because that is a time where, you know, that we can unite more as a community because everybody has to eat.
Yeah.
um, my sisters are, again, much handier than I am in the kitchen, and they've actually taken to doing themed dinners the past
Whoa.
couple of. So once a week we've done it. 2 weeks ago we had a quarantine themed dinner. So we had pandemic pizza and like stay at home seltzer and, you know, stuff like that. It was very, very clever. And then this past week they decided to do a Tiger King themed dinner.
That's
Um,
good now. That is so,
oh,
yeah.
it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So they had us all dress up like characters from the show, and they made us, you know, they did the same thing. It was a lovely dinner with different Tiger King themed menu items. Um, and it's silly, and it's not like it's not something that you would necessarily do outside of quarantine every night. But you know what? We're stuck in here, so we might as well do something fun to pass the time. Um, and I can hear some of our young people out there saying, well, wait a minute, I can't cook. What am I supposed to do? Um, and that's fair.
Mhm.
I guarantee to you that probably the person who does the most cooking in your house, whether it's your mom, your dad, might be your grandmother, whomever it is, um, they would probably love your help with cooking a meal.
Oh,
Um, you don't have to be the head chef. I am no genius in the kitchen, but I try sometimes. And now is as good a time as ever to learn how to cook. Right?
mhm.
I mean, when you get to college, if you go to college, it will save your life, right? And obviously, when you're an adult, you're going to need to know how to cook anyways. Um, so that's an important thing. When you mentioned prayer, I think that's something that's really important to internalize, and we often it can be kind of a skate over point. Like, oh yeah, like of course we need to pray. Yep.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, sure, okay. So I'll say my grace before meal. I'll say an Our Father before bed, something like that, and those are good. Those are absolutely good.
Mhm.
But something that I've tried to do a little bit more um, during the quarantine is the Divine Mercy Chaplet.
Oh,
Um, it's, first of all, we could really use some Divine Mercy right now. Um, and secondly, I like to view the Divine Mercy Chaplet as a great introduction to the Rosary for people who are intimidated by the Rosary because it's so long.
mhm.
Um, you know, if you don't have a daily kind of intense prayer life, sometimes the Rosary can be too high a bar to start off on. Um, the Divine Mercy Chaplet still uses the Rosary. You know, you keep track on the beads, but the prayers are a lot shorter and more repetitive. But it's also just a great prayer for right now, because it's the thing that you're repeating is, have mercy on us and on the whole world. Hmm. Sounds pretty timely to me. So if you and your family, maybe you don't pray together all the time, maybe you don't pray together at all, maybe you personally have difficulty sitting down and praying, take one person from your family, Google Divine Mercy Chaplet. It's there. I promise it will take you less than 10 minutes. Give it a shot. Just give it a shot. Um, it's a great way to introduce prayer into your life during this time without taking this super high bar and spending a half an hour in deep solemn contemplative prayer. It's Yeah, I mean that's something that I've really been focusing on, and it's helped me quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and it helps to create a space within yourself of silence and receptivity, because that's where Christ is going to reach us. So
Mm,
I love prayers like the Divine Mercy Chaplet and the Rosary, because I'm one of those people that it helps to settle me when it's that repetitive prayer. Because
mm.
I get all these ideas sparking in my head, I think about 10 million different things, and I just need to, all right, exactly. And so that's where those repetitive prayers are great for me spiritually, because it helps to silence. And now's a great time to experiment too with different places of prayer. So if you're connecting to someone digitally, that's great. But maybe you can still be outside and do that. Maybe you can find a little corner of your house where that can be a space. And it's important to create that space of prayer too, because it's another external way to create an interior place to reach God.
Mm. Well said. Yeah, it's where we pray matters
Mhm.
just as much as what we pray sometimes.
That's right. And since you can't go, many people can't go to the chapel or to the exposition of the Holy Eucharist. Find a way and maybe an image that you respond to, and create a space and create
Sure.
a chapel at home. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the spaces that we're in have more of an impact on us than we think. Um, and I find myself getting a lot more out of prayer and feeling like it's a more spiritual experience when I pray in a space that's not my bedroom specifically. Because that's where I spend most of my time right now
mm-hmm.
is, working or even relaxing after work. I'll read a book in my bed, or I'll, play video games while sitting in my room or something like that. It's so intentionally going to another space um, can really make a big difference because it takes you out of your comfort zone and
Absolutely.
into the God zone.
I like that.
um, God zone, yeah,
It's like the
God zone.
splash zone, but it's God zone.
Ooh, there you go. I would never sit in
Holy
the splash
Spirit.
zone. I am not a guy who enjoys like water on my clothes. It just really gets to me. I don't know.
Except for the holy water, right? When the priest is,
Oh, that's
you're
different.
fine with that.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
fine with that. Fine with that. It's that's more of like a sprinkling, as opposed to a
Uh,
dousing. So anyway, yeah, that's I think that seems as good a place as any to kind of slowly come in for a landing here. Is on prayer and on using the time and the space that we do have, um, even though it may not be ideal, for good. And you started this, so I'm going to finish it. You brought up Ian McKellen earlier, so I am going to pluck my favorite quote from Lord of the Rings and use it here, because it's the greatest thing that man has created outside of the Bible and the church. So there is a quote in the first Lord of the Rings book slash movie, whichever you prefer. And basically, Frodo is complaining about how he has this huge burden of carrying the One Ring and saving the world. And he's like, oh, I wish this had never come to me. I wish I had been in a different time. And Gandalf says, oh, such a good quote. He says, so do all who live to see such times, but that's not for them to decide. All that we have to decide is what to do with the time that we're given. And that's kind of where we're at right now. I don't think any of us would have wished for this. Um, None of us would have wished to be stuck at home all the time. None of us would have wished to experience Holy Week through a screen. Um, but that's not for us to decide. There is one who knows much better than we do, um, and he is in control, and we are not to attempt to supersede his authority because we're going to lose. Um, all we have to decide is what to do with this time and with this kind of enforced intentional community that we have. And yeah, I think if there's one thing that, you know, our young people take away from watching this, it's that I want them to, and I pray that they will kind of take charge of this time. You probably have a lot more freedom with your time than you did before, even with online schooling. You know, there's no commuting to and from school. Um, there's a lot of empty space, and we get to choose how to fill it. Um, so that's what I would want our young people to take away from this entire experience. So sister, do you have any final thoughts? Any last nuggets of wisdom you'd like to share?
I think one reflection that it's not fully formed, I keep coming back to it though, is the meaning of the upper room, especially leaving Holy Thursday, going into Good Friday, um, Saturday, Easter Sunday, and all the way through Pentecost. Really, we right now are in an upper room situation, and the upper room was a place to be close to Christ. It was also a place to hide. It was a place to stay away from the danger. It was a place to be away from the chaos. Um, so I'm not really sure where I'm going with that meditation, but whatever that could be for someone else, think about Christ in the upper room, the apostles in the upper room when Christ is no longer there. And fear was a big part of it, but so was trust and
Mm,
hope.
mm, definitely, definitely. Trusting that, you know, they weren't in control, just like we need to trust that we're not in control, but somebody else is, and he knows what he's doing.
And he loves us indescribably. He loves us more than we love ourselves or could ever love anyone else.
Right. And that's a comforting thought in a time where we could really use some comfort. It's nice to know that someone's got our back, and it's someone who cares more for us than we could ever imagine. Right. Well, I think that is a great time to wrap it up. So, sister, thank you so much for taking the time to just have a discussion with me, and hopefully, uh, inspire our young people a little bit with some ideas of how to navigate this mandatory intentional community that we're all in right now. Um, I wish you a very blessed rest of your Holy Week and Triduum and Easter Sunday. And I think both of us wish the same for our young people. It is still Holy Week. It is still the holiest time of the year, and we still have a lot to commemorate, a lot to mourn, and a lot to celebrate. So let's not forget that during this time. Great. All right, sister. Well, thank you again so much, and hopefully I will see you before too long.
Great. I hope so too. Thank you, Regis.
All right. Thank you.